all there virtual racers and sim lifers, thanks for clicking and welcome back to some Mon Bazou madness. Today we're working on that sugar shack progress so that we can produce our own maple syrup. We'll never have to worry about that thirst meter for the sweet goodness ever again after we get this set up. Plus, this thing can generate a pile of cash by selling the excess to the Maple Syrup Federation in town. So let's get going. Our first step in this task, especially if you're brand new to this game, is locating the foundation area, which will eventually be a small log cabin. It's buried a little bit out in the forest behind the player's starter RV. It's a short enough distance that a vehicle isn't necessary, but at least the ATV can be useful in moving tools that you'll need to start the construction of the cabin. At least take the chainsaw, but the cutters can also be relevant. These shears, which can be purchased from the local gas station, allow players to clip off a portion of the tree so that it can be replanted for reforestation. Having a steady supply of firewood isn't just great for making extra income, you'll also need that firewood to power the furnace for the sugar shack's production. The building location is just beyond the converging pathways in the backyard forest. It looks like a big wooden frame rack for holding firewood. There's also a big old green circle near it for a drop-off point. This is where you'll bring pine logs chopped from the surrounding grounds. Note that it's only pine logs for this job, and we need 64 of them to complete it. Clearing out the pine around the drop-off point is not only convenient, it might be necessary later on when trying to fill up the area with maple trees specifically needed for the maple syrup. Might as well thin out the pine to build up the cabin, and later on I'll probably clear out the birch for some extra firewood. You can choose to do what I'm doing here, which is clipping off a twig piece to replant further from the shack. It does take a while for them to grow into full size. It seems to be about 10 to 15 in-game days, so I'm trying to get the area as dense as possible with trees. But you can always go with the straight-up chainsaw method and buzz those trees down. There's just a lot of running back and forth to do at this point until the wood receptacle has reached its full capacity. Upon slugging the 64th pine log to the green circle, the sense of humor from the game will pop up. Literally. It tells you to back up, then back up some more, but now you've gone too far, so come back a little bit to see your sugar shack appear with video game magic. And look at how adorable it is too. It looks like we got a big reservoir and a pump already out here. So let's go inside and have a look at the interior, which is full of machines already prepped for us to make maple syrup. How convenient. Lots of shiny equipment in here, but we'll still have to make a run to the Maple Syrup Federation in town for additional supplies to connect the trees to the shack's processing system. It's neat that there's a mug on the wall for direct syrup intake while working, something to tide us over until we can get the stuff for personal stockpiling. If you'll remember, there's written to-do lists left for you inside the shed. One of them is involved in the entire set of tasks just for this location. After construction, the next is buying tubing, and this can be obtained through the Syrup Federation. It's in this location on the player map. The easiest route to find it is by exiting the gas station, headed towards the school, usually easy to spot with the big yellow bus parked outside. Drive right past the school, and for a short distance, look for a large white warehouse off to the right. In the corner front of the building is some sort of showroom and office area where syrup making supplies are available. Some of the items you'll find here expand on the equipment, including the canner, but the starter items that we'll need right now are right in front of us as we walk in the door. There's a corner with tubing, tree spouts by the box, and posts that will help route tubing for longer distances. But silly me, I brought the Konig for this shopping trip, and the spouts barely fit in the front seat along with a roll of tubing, but it's at least enough to experiment. I recommend bringing the farm truck if you think you're going to need those posts. Our primary objective is to figure out how to loop this tubing around to a bunch of maple trees and then back to the sugar shack vacuum pump. Standing near fully grown maple, equip a spout from the package and stick it right into the tree. This provides 2 mounting points for tubing. These can be removed and remounted repeatedly for positioning, which may be necessary as the tubing will not pass through the trees. There's a bit of a collision zone there to give you a puzzle challenge during this task. One certainly could be strategic about how they place their saplings in order to make this process a little easier. Once you've got a few spouts in, grab a roll of tubing and equip it. You'll notice that when you do, some new interface lights show up, showing the location of the spouts. Here you start connecting one piece of the tubing, starting at one spout, and connecting it to another and another. Eventually, all of these will have to be linked to the pump that's on the side of the cabin. So this does take a little consideration of where to start and how to connect them all together. Should you find yourself having trouble stringing these together, getting a red laser line instead of the blue tubing, try repositioning the spout off to the side of the tree facing the one you're trying to connect to. It may be just enough of an angle change to get it connected up. You might want to hang on to a few of the empty tubing rolls. Should you want to unwind some of your tubing mess later, to remove the line, it requires having the tubing equipped, then right-click to remove. It winds the tubing back onto the roll for later. We can also use those tubing stakes available from the Federation showroom. Each has 4 mounting points for tubing that can act as a pass-through from tree to tree. But since it has 4 connection points, you can also use it to offshoot new lines out to trees that have yet to be connected. The more trees which are connected to the system, naturally the more sap it can pull into the harvested store within these giant transparent tanks outside the cabin. The more trees which are connected to the system, naturally, the more sap it can pull into the harvest to store within the giant transparent tanks outside. When you hover over the vacuum pump, it provides key information to if it's running, how many trees are connected, and the status of the input being very bad, kinda okay, okay. And if you're wondering about the 69 theme pervasive throughout the game, yep, it's here too. Should you have exactly 69 trees, you'll get its own unique status. I have found that having 60 to 70 trees will keep one quite active producing syrup with the single tank setup and firewood powered evaporator. With the 2-tank upgrade, I would recommend closer to 100 trees to really max it out. The pump will run from 9 a.m. every morning until 1600, or 4 p.m. translated. At that point, it becomes too cold for it to operate. During that time, it will steadily pull in sap for processing. But to do so, head on inside the cabin where your prefab evaporator and reservoir are located. Look for the pipe running along the wall with the vacuum pump. It has a handle valve on top which releases sap water into the evaporator. The clear fluid will start to fill up the tubs atop the furnace. The cubby underneath is probably obvious, it's where the firewood goes. 4 pieces is optimal for a fast boil action, but 3 will actually get you started anyway. Add at least 1 piece of the newspaper from the nearby box, and to light it, use the map torch provided by the starter shed near the RV. Should you need more of these, they're available at the gas station for 25 bucks. Once the fire is lit, watch the dial on the front of the evaporator. Optimal syrup boiling temperature is 100 to 107 degrees Celsius. It can't exceed this, so you don't have to worry about burning it, but the flow of the reservoir will stop if the heat inside the furnace falls too low. Needless to say, this is going to require pretty persistent attention. As the temperature drops, we can add on another log or 2 to boost it back to boiling. It takes some time to get down a pattern of how much is needed, but eventually you'll get a sense of how much or how little is needed. If you don't love chopping firewood, you'll want to get this down to a science. Don't forget the little bonus here, the little white mug hanging from the hook on the wall. That neat little mechanism there can relieve you of your thirst for syrup directly, hot right off the evaporator. I find that since opening up the Sugar Shack, I've reduced my reliance on the Cali gas bottles, supply to over half my consumption. I sure do spend a lot of time chilling in this shack. If you do too, maybe you'll be entertained by this little radio sitting here on the shelf. Click the power on, scroll the wheel to increase or decrease the volume, plus the 6-channel buttons to flip through for different selections of music available. The boiled off syrup product is then pumped through a press. This step doesn't require any maintenance and will take care of itself automatically as long as the building has power. After passing through the press, the final product will make its way into the reservoir. The provided equipment will store up to 240 liters and can be upgraded to 480 with about a 10K investment from the Federation. Even the 240 version will allow you to store up to a day's worth of production. You'll eventually need barrels for long-term storage or sales. These also can be purchased from the Federation store. They cost 200 each, and you will get the barrel back the day after turning them in for sale. Note that you can only buy one per day, so maybe stock up whenever you get the chance. Placing the barrels underneath the reservoir spout requires being fairly precise. Dance around a little bit to find the right position to pick it up, turn it, and set it upright with the white cap lined up under the spout. You'll know if you've gotten it close enough when you've turned the handle. If you've got a fairly faint glow of golden syrup with a ticking percentage going up, then you're good. It can take a bit of fiddling around to get it positioned correctly from time to time. The full barrels can be deposited at the Syrup Federation from 8 a.m. until 1600 at the pallet next to the warehouse. Mind you, this is only on Monday through Friday type of business, so be sure to grab any supplies that you'll need or drop off any syrup before the long weekend. Look for the usual lit green circle for an extra area to drop off the barrels. Cha-ching! Should be $200 per barrel upon drop-off, and then an additional $200 will be paid every Sunday for the next 5 weeks, making syrup barrels worth $1,200 in total. Not bad for how fast you can start accumulating it. The Federation will accept up to 12 barrels per day. When stacked week over week, these turn-ins can make those expensive upgrades seem not so out of reach anymore, such as the electric furnace, which will replace your current one and put it into set it or forget it mode. No more of having to manage firewood inventory or constantly pay attention to temperature. This unit will do all that for you as long as you're hooked up to the power grid. There's going to be a section on how to do that in my first video on Mon Bazou. I'll link it in the corner above and look for the chapter on permanent electricity. Also in stock is the reservoir upgrade, doubling the capacity of storage for syrup so you don't even have to worry about barreling it up for a day or two. Speaking of doubling capacity, there's an additional sap water tank unit that sits outside for sale of the showroom. If you're starting to procure yourself a forest of hundreds of trees or so, the tank capacity will help you capture more profit opportunity for later processing. Another useful upgrade for consideration is the reverse osmosis unit. When installed, it takes up space on the wall of the cabin behind the furnace, near the spout's handle. Why it's worth the price tag is that it'll boil sap water at 50% faster. Our already equipped press can handle the increased output and will take away 2 liters per cycle instead of 1. Tucked in the corner of the Federation showroom is a canner, along with all of its supplies, cans, lids, and a crate to hold them in. Like any of the other larger upgrades, this one is auto-installed in minutes and will be sitting on top of the previously empty table inside the cabin. To operate this, load a pack of lids into the canning machine. It will notify you of how many are in there when hovering over it. Pick up a can and drag it towards the center of the mount of the machine. It should snap into place and start turning the lid, applying it. A label will then be added, and now you've got your own syrup supply, which is also giftable to NPCs for extra daily rep. In a recent update, the showroom was expanded to accommodate a syrup tank, which can be fitted to the bed of the truck with 2 bolts. This useful addition takes the headache out of barrels juggling themselves around the truck bed. I've had to stop more than a few times to retrieve barrels from the road that tumbled right out, man overboard style, from the bed of the truck. The tanker holds the equivalent of 10 barrels, and it will conveniently connect itself automatically to the reservoir located inside the shack when driving close enough to the shack for the pipeline to reach. Now, that wraps up this short guide on syrup making in Mon Bazou. I'll be back with more guides in this funnest game in the future. We have some modifying to do on these vehicles, so take care y'all and bye-bye!